I've never been more pleased to see a 5-story tall stack of human skeletons. In the late 1970s, the fall of Vietnam created a vacuum in Cambodia, and Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge moved in, doing some whooping and some killing. I went to Cambodia in 1993. I did no whooping, and I did no killing. I was a very large white man from America. This was always very obvious during my Southeast Asia trip in 1993. Being a liberal Portlander, I wanted to be accepted, but being lazy, I didn't learn any languages. So I would waddle up to a native and smile and be nice. And within a few days of my first landing in Southeast Asia, I had this amazing experience. I got to go back to a monk came up to me on the street. He was like, come on. He didn't say come on. I don't know what he said because I didn't learn the goddamn language. But he took me back to the monkastery where all the monks were monking, and he showed me off. And basically he said, "This is the biggest human I have ever seen." And that was the theme of my trip. I traveled with 2 traveling companions, and we likened the experience to if you were to see an elaborate clown on the street. Some people would point at the clown, some people would pretend the clown was not there, and then other people would come up to the clown and they would touch the clown. And so people, children, adults, old women would come up and they would touch me and they'd pull my hair and they'd look at my giant American calves and they would size them up with their hands. The temples of Angkor are an amazing place to see. It's like Indiana Jones. When we were there in 1993, the Civil War was still going on. There were places we couldn't go because some of the temples were still booby-trapped by the retreating Khmer Rouge. So we were there for several days, and then it was time to go back. And either we could spend $135 to fly back to Phnom Penh, or we could take a boat for $0.25. So my friend Scott and I bought a couple of loaves of French bread and a bunch of bananas, and we paid our $0.25 and we went to get on the boat. And the boat ride was supposed to be about a day. For the first day, we sat on the boat, and it did not move. And then the boat, by literally the light of the full moon, started to go down the river to the Great Lake. 2 days later, all of our French bread and bananas were gone, and Scott had the shits. Scott was not as big as me, but he's as tall as I am, and the hole that you shit into on the boat was in a closet about that big. So imagine yourself jammed inside, shitting uncontrollably. Scott began to make a case for getting off the boat. And we did. So we braved it. It was myself and Scott, an Australian, and 2 French women. Now, the only people more crazy than Australians are the Israelis. And that's a whole other story. There would be signs up saying no Israelis in the guest houses. We met an Israeli trying to sell his shoes so he could fly home. We saw him an hour later. He had met his brother also trying to sell his shoes to fly home. So we're in this taxi at night during a civil war in a country where none of us speak the language. And the Australian says, I hope they don't check our bags. I found some RPGs. That's rocket-propelled grenades. So we start driving back to Phnom Penh. And we start going checkpoint to checkpoint. Just like a bunch of guys like, hey, let's get our guns, make a checkpoint. We'll see if the rebels are here. And we would pull up to a checkpoint, and these guys with guns, terrified, would point them at the car and slowly walk toward us. The car that had the grenades in the trunk. And of course, I'm in the front seat because I'm gigantic, and everyone else is in the back. So it's me and the driver. And the driver is terrified, just looking forward. So I'm just looking forward. And a pattern begins to emerge. Every time they come to my side of the car and point the gun at me, they smile and put the gun down. By the third checkpoint, as we drove up, I was leaning out the window, hi guys! I'm from America! We're just fine! I knew we were close to Phnom Penh because we passed a checkpoint. Thanks, guys, that was great! And I saw one of the memorials to the dead, 5 stories tall, filled with human remains. And it was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen because it was 10 minutes drive from our hotel. Thank you.